Before we start the show, just a small note to say that episode 8 was recorded before the sad passing of Chadwick Boseman.
You're listening to The Extra Real with Ger Brown
and Colm Ryan for a look at the bigger picture of film.
with films from around the world.
Through the decades,
From movies you know and love.
to movies you need to discover.
Okay, so this week on the show we're going to talk about Spike Lee's The Five Bloods.
Yep, the latest film from Spike Lee, released on Netflix. It was meant to be a Cannes, but obviously with all that's happened with the coronavirus, that was not possible. So it's come straight to Netflix, and I think it was the most watched film on Netflix when it was released.
Yeah, well, it's timely. And
Very
timely. Yeah. Now, Spike Lee, are you a fan?
Yeah, I'm actually a big fan. I always quite enjoy his stuff. He's got such a... Obviously, he's probably one of the most important black filmmakers around, but also he's a great craftsman, I think. And his films have great kind of a signature look to them, kind of feel to them. They always will make you feel something because he's such a kind of passionate person. Yes, I'm a huge fan. You?
Yeah. I'm kind of up and down. Some of his stuff, and I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head. He's a passionate guy. You know, they're heavily political. And when they're good, they can be masterpieces. I mean, I really feel that way about Do the Right Thing and Black Klansman. It's hugely enjoyable. But at his worst, he can be prone to making films that are overlong and that don't really work. They're always stylish, but you know, I think I have issues. I definitely have favorites, and when he's very good, he's excellent, and then sometimes I just find sometimes he's a little bit long-winded.
Yeah, I guess.
And I feel like I deliberately made that point in a long-winded way.
Well, I think of the recent films, I guess one that was kind of a flop was, say, the remake of Old Boy. I don't know if that was entirely his fault, if I'm honest. I think that the idea to remake that film for me personally was like a non-starter.
I know, yeah.
And it feels like even when you watch it, it doesn't feel like a Spike Lee film at all. Compared to like other films that say something like 25th Hour.
Yeah.
Although it's not about, say, it's more about this white guy just about to go to jail, but it's still a really powerful piece and still got a lot of the kind of the Spike Lee trademarks in it. One of the things he always has in his films, and he has in this film, is a character talking to screen. And we have that with Delroy Lindo's character of Paul within this film. He always has that kind of element within his film where just a character's kind of monologuing screen, and those scenes are always really powerful for me.
Yeah, these films are always highly cinematic, you know? Like, what you're not just getting a run-of-the-mill TV movie type presentation of anything. You're getting something that has a little bit of extra cinematic verve, like the stuff where he's breaking the fourth wall, like the stuff with the ghost, which we'll talk about in a while. So, yeah, he is a supremely confident filmmaker.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is actually the kind of film where I don't really have to kind of give a big long-winded synopsis.
No.
4 Vietnam vets returned to Vietnam to retrieve gold bars buried during the war, plus the remains of their good friend Storm and Norman. And really, that's the film. The film starts with them going to Vietnam, and they're going to find the skulls. Obviously, there's a lot more to it from there, but that's the simple kind of breakdown.
And it's rare to the actual plot of this. You could see in plenty of direct to DVD type films. I know we're going direct to streaming, and Netflix is we're in a strange period where there are no cinemas open. But this is the type of stuff that's B-movie dross, really. Bunch of guys go to Vietnam to find gold. So what? But he makes it into a cinematic experience, which is layered with the political background, the horrors of the war, the horrors of racism, and even issues dealing with father-son relationships, and father-daughter relationships as well. So it's, a highly layered piece which is a take on what is essentially a B movie, and so I think that's really interesting. So the plot synopsis doesn't give us a whole pile, but there's loads there.
There is loads there, and even if we talk about, say, the casting, originally, because I think the script for this started in, I think it was first sold in like 2013, and I don't know if it was Oliver Stone attached to direct rather than Spike Lee, and the original cast was meant to be Samuel L. Jackson, Giancarlo Esposito, Don Cheadle, and Denzel Washington's son, John David Washington, of course, is in BlacKkKlansman. And now it's like definitely the cast completely changed, and you have Delroy Lindo playing Paul, who's he's a brilliant actor, but he's kind of more known for kind of character actor roles, or he's that guy playing that police chief in a film or something like that. He turns up in a lot of stuff, but he's never really a main guy. Jonathan Majors, who plays his son David, he's not really been in much stuff. He's quite new to acting. I think he only started his first role was in like 2011. Clark Peters playing Otis. I know him as playing Detective Lester Freeman in The Wire, and also Isaiah Whitlock Jr., who used to play Clayton Clay Davis in The Wire, and then you've got Norm Lewis as Eddie. So these guys are kind of more known as, I guess, actors in TV shows and things like that, or guys in smaller parts in movies. But it's kind of excellent to see them get a movie and really show their acting chops.
Yeah, and some of them worked with Spike Lee before.
Yeah, Delroy Lindo, I think, started with Spike Lee, he didn't start with Spike Lee, but he definitely was like one of his first films was, was it 1992? Was that Crooklyn, maybe? More Better Blues. I can't remember. I have to do my research on that one. But yeah, I guess, and you also have someone like Jean Reno.
Well, when Jean Reno popped up, I was just so excited, because I haven't seen him in ages in anything, and I think he's 72 now. And so his action days are kind of, his best action days are kind of behind him. But it was great just to see him, because he has been popping up in a few bits and pieces, but nothing really prominent. Nothing's got a prominent release around here for a while. And so it was a joy to see him.
And he kind of brings that kind of, I don't know, he's got a certain gravitas, doesn't he, or something. He's got a great charm to him. He's
got star presence, and he really brings it to the villainous role of DeRoche. I loved him. I thought he was great. Yeah. Of course, we've got Melanie Thierry as well, from Zero Theorem, and Bertrand Tavernier as well, the Princess of Montpensier, which I really liked, and she's excellent in that. I hated Zero Theorem, by the way. And it's rare that you'll hear me say I hate it. I found it absolutely irredeemable. I thought it was the worst Terry Gilliam film.
I've heard it wasn't great.
I felt like he was riffing on all the other ones. Now, I haven't seen The Man Who Killed Don Quixote, so judgment is kind of I'm going to hold my judgment a while.
And of course, then you have Chadwick Boseman, who is probably, of the people in this film, is probably the biggest star, I guess.
He's the one with the biggest box office appeal at the moment, anyway. Yeah,
biggest box office appeal, obviously, from playing Black Panther and stuff. But he's only in the film in very kind of brief scenes, but he's very powerful in those scenes. So it's a really kind of like, it's a very interesting cast. Spike Lee is brilliant at those kind of ensemble casts anyway.
Yeah.
Who would you say is like the main character here? Would you say it is Delroy Lindo? It's very hard to...
It's hard to say. I mean, what I am seeing from an awful lot of other articles and reviews about it is that people are kind of saying that he's emerging as the person that they might be able to pin a Best Actor nomination on. But it feels like that's the only real reason. It does really, I suppose, when you look at it objectively, it's quite an ensemble piece. And don't forget, we also have Paul Walter Hauser as well, who was in BlacKkKlansman, and also excellent in Richard Jewell, Clint Eastwood's. So we're segueing on from a previous episode. So he was excellent in Richard Jewell. He's really good in this. Small part, but a decent little part. And proving his chops as a really solid supporting actor or character actor. So structurally, what's going on here?
I mean, it's a strange one because he's chosen to do something very interesting in terms of look of the film. So obviously the modern day scenes are shot, regular cameras, nothing different really to what you'd see. But the older scenes, the scenes shot in the war, are shot in 60mm. So you have these kind of flashback scenes shot in like 60mm, the cameras of the time, obviously the film used of that time, giving them that kind of different look.
Yeah.
And also, in a strange kind of move, I suppose, for many people, in that in the flashback scenes where you see the guys in the war, it's the same actors playing the younger versions of the characters, but he's chosen not to go down the Irishman route and de-age everything. They're also the same age. So
that really threw me.
Choice.
That really threw me initially.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until we spoke about it and you were like, no, there's a reason behind that. And
yeah, well, I think the reason is that it's kind of, they're kind of trying to look at it through their memories, and it's just kind of like, this is how I remember it, but physically they seem to look the same. So yeah, I think it was just the characters' memories was how they were trying to show it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get the one scene of the aging at the very end, like one scene.
Yeah.
But I wonder. I don't know. Was it like maybe criticism of some of the Irishman stuff, or was it just his choice? He was like, no, I want to do things differently here. That he went for it.
I think retrospectively it kind of works. If you're making the argument that it's their experience in Vietnam, their memory of it, then it does work. But initially it threw me. I was going, are they what's going on there? Are they DH? No, they're not. Why have they still got grey hair? And so that was strange. Also, I mean, when you're talking about the look, I think also what was really interesting was the fact that he played around with different aspect ratios.
Yeah.
So you've got the 239 is to 1 widescreen for the present day stuff, which is really, really interesting, really handy. And apparently they chose that because when you see the guys framed, it's perfect for framing the 4 of them, or the 5 of them, as the case may be, when David is included, as a group, as a team. So when they're dancing around the Apocalypse Now nightclub, which is apparently a real nightclub.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah. It's I have to double check what the locals call it, but I think it's Apo Now or something like that, or Apo, going to Apo. So I could be wrong. But anyway, so yeah, that's a real nightclub in real life. It might be a recreation elsewhere of it, but it actually exists. So it's great for that sort of stuff. Then, as you were saying, you've got the 16mm footage, which is I think it's 133, and then you've got the jungle footage, which is 16:9. So the frame opens up again, which is really interesting because what I think what the DOP was saying is that the Siegel, it was that they wanted the guys to be encapsulated in the jungle so that they're surrounded by green at all times when they're in the jungle. And then they revert to 239 again for present day, but shot on Super 8 stuff when they're doing the tourist boat stuff.
Yeah, that was
so
really
that
cool,
was
actually.
interesting. Like, to be honest, like it's heartening to see people using aspect ratios in that sort of way from a narrative point of view, because I'm so sick of watching short films where people just slap the 239 on it and you see heads and chins cropped off and you're just going, why did you do that? Because it's more cinematic. It's not more cinematic, it's more of a mess. It's just taking your tools and using them wrong. It's like using a trowel when you shouldn't have used the shovel, really, or vice versa.
It's actually interesting talking about the 8mm stuff on the boat, actually, and stuff like that. That I quite enjoyed about that was you got these little kind of, I don't know, when you were looking at the characters kind of interacting in the 8mm, it had such a kind of a realistic feel or something.
Yeah.
And it really kind of brought, like, you just felt it almost separated the actors from the characters, if you know what I mean, when they're just sitting around the boat enjoying their own company and stuff like that. And I really kind of enjoyed that.
Yeah. Something else, because we haven't touched, well, we've kind of briefly touched on it about the nightclub, but the connections to other films, like they make references to, obviously very overt references to Apocalypse Now, with both the nightclub and also with shots of the helicopters, use of Ride of the Valkyries and stuff like that.
Valkyries, yeah.
You know, and going up any river in a boat near Vietnam or anywhere in Vietnam, you're going to think of Apocalypse Now. They mentioned the stuff about Rambo, the stuff about looking for real heroes, people jumping on grenades, and referencing things like the 80s trend of "do we get to win this time" type movies, like Rambo 2, like Missing in Action 1 and 2. Can't remember if it really covers it in 3, but anyway, that sort of Chuck Norris, Uncommon Valor, those sort of movies are referenced in it. And I suppose that sort of stuff's interesting, and it's great to see their kind of riposte to them, because you're dealing with a conflict where I think 25% of the casualties were Black Americans. They only make up 13% of the population.
I know.
So that's crazy.
That is crazy. I loved the character. Was it played by Van Veronica Hugo, who played Hanoi Hannah, who's actually a real person. I didn't realize that she was a real person. Who kind of they play these scenes where she's obviously she's talking on radio, she's doing these broadcasts and everything, but they kind of film her, and her kind of job, that person's job, was to basically through the airwaves was to give American soldiers news, but also say to them, look, why are you fighting us? There's a lot more bad things going on in your own country. You shouldn't be here. And that underpins, I guess, the kind of, because these characters back in the Vietnam War are called to the Bloods, that underpins a lot of what Stormer Norman is trying to teach them as well, about like Black history, about like, should they be in this war? It's also a really beautiful scene. I don't know if you remembered it. Well, it's a sad scene, actually. It's beautiful in the sense of when back in the war, the five guys are they're kind of waiting for these Vietnamese soldiers to ambush them. But Spike Lee does a great job in terms of like he has subtitles for what the Vietnamese soldiers are saying, and they're basically saying things like, oh, I sent a letter to my girlfriend, or I did all this. And so often in these films, Vietnamese soldiers are just like people who don't have a voice. They're just bad guys with guns, So I thought that was just a kind of a really powerful scene in terms of like, but all it needed was to give subtitles to these Vietnamese soldiers, basically.
Yeah, and I think it's been reviewed very favorably by Vietnamese, even though it wasn't shot in Vietnam. They've kind of pointed out things exactly like that scene, where they've been given their voice for a change, which hasn't been the case in an awful lot of films, and also the fact that I think they're speaking like fluent Vietnamese as opposed to phonetic Vietnamese is also an issue for the Vietnamese audiences. So I think it's good to see that happening. Also, I forgot to mention earlier on the Treasure of Sierra Madre. Is another kind of cinematic reference, and they make overt references to it with the stinking badges line and stuff like that, and it's a very worthy addition to that type of movie as well. Like the way it develops, and I also like the way that Delroy Lindo's character is a rounded character. It was hard for him to play a Trump supporter, apparently.
Of course.
And Delroy Lindo is really interesting from the point of view of the fact that his character is really complex, and he's got flaws that are apparent. It's kind of a King Lear-like thing. So I think that stuff was great, and to see the way that the team kind of unravels a small bit, created great conflict, great drama. How did you find the action sequences in it?
I thought they were excellent in terms of like, I know we were talking about kind of the use of squibs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That maybe it's a bit over the top.
Yeah, well,
some of the jungle scenes, like the flashback jungle scenes.
There's two schools of thought to it. Like you're probably looking at, from an actor's safety point of view, I'm sure they prefer a CGI squib any day over a remote controlled one, little explosive, especially anything near your face or anything like that. But and like from a practical speed point of view, from shooting and stuff like that, you don't have to wait around for the special effects guys to rig someone up. But I have to say, I found it a little bit annoying, particularly from the opening action sequences. I found the final action sequence fine.
I think what's interesting as well is these guys these are obviously older characters, but they don't go down the whole route of they're older guys, so they're going to be, they're all going to be stuck with arthritis, or they're all going to have this kind of issue. I mean, obviously, I think it's the character of Otis. He has an addiction to OxyContin, and he takes them for back pain. But it's not the kind of the old tired joke you see in a lot of Hollywood films where, half the jokes about a character who's over 60 is that, oh, I can barely get up these stairs, or, hands are shaking or anything like that. Like, these are capable guys who fought in a war. The character of Paul has been in like 3 tours. So I really kind of enjoyed that element as well. But in terms of action, actually, I think what is really effective here is tension.
Yes.
Like, we know when the character of Hetty, Melanie Thierry's character, meets David, she works to find landmines throughout the jungle in Vietnam. And it's like, that's going to come into the story in some way in the future.
Because you meet the little boy as well earlier on in the film who's lost his leg. So the legacy of the war is very real. And yeah, it does create tension, and that's why, even though there isn't lots of action, when it comes, I felt like it lands with a right good thud, and you really feel it.
Definitely. And you've got that kind of, I guess spoilers for later on in the film, but you've got that amazing scene where Eddie has been blown up by a landmine.
Yeah.
But at the same time, David steps on one, and they meet these characters. With Hetty and her two male colleagues who are like trying to stop these landmines. They just happen to come onto the scene with the Bloods, and you've got this kind of tough scene where they've got to get David away from this landmine, but they've just found this gold, and Paul's gone a bit mad. So it's like they save David from the landmine, but then you get into a situation where Paul just turns on everyone. And he's like, we've got to keep this gold. These people are here. So it's this kind of strange kind of flip scene, I guess.
Yeah.
It's excellent.
Yeah. And then I suppose we need to just look at the critical reception around. It's not exactly, like, it's been fairly well reviewed, but it's not been, like, hands down, absolute masterpiece. Why do you think that is?
I think, like you said about some of Spike Lee's films earlier, I think it is a bit overlong.
Okay.
It's 2 hours, 30-something minutes, 34 minutes, I think. Maybe it is a bit overlong. Sometimes there is quite the tonal shift when we move from the present-day scenes to the flashback scenes. A bit too much at times. Like, it's definitely a very serious film. It's got lighter moments, of course. But I don't know, like something like Black Klansman feels like a better put together film, I think.
I think Black Klansman is leaner. The score is probably better. I think the score in this is pretty good. Well, you've got the Marvin Gaye stuff. Okay, so do you want to talk about Marvin Gaye and music in this? Are you the Marvin Gaye fan of the two? I mean, I thought that when that stuff crops up, it's fine. I found some of the other stuff almost in the same zone, but not quite hitting the same highs as Black Klansman. It's melodramatic music, I felt overall, and it's fine like that. I thought it was a bit more workmanlike.
Yeah, I'm a huge Marvin Gaye fan. I've always thought he's one of those people who, if you could make a biopic, I think you could make a brilliant one about Marvin Gaye. His life's so interesting. But I guess what I really loved here is that the use of obviously What's Going On, which is probably, one of Marvin Gaye's most famous songs, but it's done in an a cappella version. And apparently, Marvin Gaye's brother fought in Vietnam, and they'd always write letters back and forth. And then What's Going On was kind of about the Vietnam War, so that's why it kind of really fits together here, I think. But yeah, whenever I hear his music come up in films, I love hearing it. Obviously, and you've got to Give It Up as in the in that club scene. So yeah, I don't know. But that I just found it very powerful. I think that you don't get that too much. You get it a bit sometimes where certain artists there's like 6 Marvin Gaye songs I think within this soundtrack, and I kind of liked that. I enjoyed that they kind of just kept popping up throughout it. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you very much for listening. You can contact the show by emailing to extrareal@gmail.com. Search for the Extra Real Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can listen to the show on Spotify, iTunes, or anywhere you get your podcast from.